Alright, so let me set the scene for you, because if I had heard this story from someone else a year ago, I probably would and oppose. V thought they were exaggerating, but no, this actually happened. Back in 2020, I bought a little in-unit townhouse in a quiet suburban complex outside a mid-sized city. Nothing fancy, just one of those rows of attached homes where everybody shares an alley in the back and the dumpsters sit about 30 feet behind the buildings. The main reason I picked that unit was the corner yard. Tiny patch of grass, small fence, but still, it felt like having my own space. Now at the time I was active duty army, so I wasn't oppos. T-home constantly, but when I was there, I liked keeping things clean, quiet, predictable. I'm the kind of guy who trims the grass, fixes the loose hinge, keeps the place looking decent. And for the first year, everything was exactly that, peaceful. Then about 12 months later, a new neighbor moved in 2 doors down. We and oppos. LL call her Lena. Single mom, 2 kids, always rushing somewhere, always on the phone. The type of person who moves through life like every second is a race against the clock. At first we barely interacted. Quick wave in the alley, maybe a polite morning. That was it. No drama, no issues, just normal neighbor stuff. Then one afternoon I noticed something weird. A fast food bag sitting near the inside of my fence. Greasy, crumpled. One of those burger chain bags with the red logo all over it. I picked it up and thought, Wind must have carried it over from somewhere. Not a big deal. Tossed it in the dumpster and went about my day. 2 days later, another one. Different restaurant this time. Same spot by the fence. Again, I assumed wind. Maybe some raccoon dragging trash around. But the third time, that's when things got interesting. I happened to be in the kitchen grabbing coffee, looking out the back window toward the alley, and I see Lena step out her back door, holding a small plastic bag. She pauses, looks toward the dumpster down the alley, literally 30 feet away. Then she looks toward my fence. And I swear to you, she just casually flicks the bag over the fence into my yard like she's tossing a baseball into a glove. No hesitation, no guilt, just toss, and she walks right back inside. I remember standing there thinking, wait, did she really just do that? So I walked over to her place and knocked. When she opened the door, I kept it friendly, neighborly tone. I said, hey, I think you might have accidentally tossed a bag over my fence. She laughed, like actually laughed, and she goes, oh, it's just trash. The dumpster's always full anyway. Now, small detail, the dumpster was not full. In fact, it was half empty. But I figured maybe she was having a stressful day. Maybe she thought it blew over there or something. So I shrugged, threw the bag away, and let it go. Big mistake. Because the next week it happened again. And again. And again. By the second month it wasn't oppos. Occasional anymore. It was routine. Every couple days something new would appear in my yard. Juice boxes, plastic wrappers, takeout containers, dirty diapers. Yeah, diapers. One afternoon I walked outside and found an entire ripped trash bag scattered across my grass like confetti made of leftover noodles and soggy napkins. That was the moment the irritation started turning into something else. I knocked on her door. No answer. Tried again later. Nothing. I even sent a message in the HOA group chat just asking if anyone else had noticed trash issues in the alley. Dead silence. So I decided to solve the mystery properly. I installed a small camera facing the fence. Nothing crazy, just one of those motion cameras you can buy online for like $40. And honestly, I expected to catch raccoons or something. Nope. First clip that came through, there she was again. Lena steps outside, looks left, looks right, then casually tosses a takeout bag over the fence into my yard. Like clockwork. That's when I realized something. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a one-time thing. She had decided my yard was basically a shortcut to avoid walking 30 feet to the dumpster. So the next time it happened, I didn't knock on her door. I didn't argue. I didn't even text the HOA. I just walked outside, picked up every single piece of trash in the yard, neatly stacked it, and placed it right on her front porch. Perfectly arranged. Like a delivery. I figured the message was pretty clear. Except the next morning, every single piece of that trash was back in my yard again. Yeah. She literally took it from her porch and threw it back over the fence. That was the moment something in my brain shifted from be polite neighbor to okay, game on. Because if someone's willing to go out of their way to disrespect your space like that, they're basically daring you to respond. So I started documenting everything. Photos, timestamps, videos, little notes in my phone. Day 17. Day 18. Day 19. Every toss over the fence got logged. At that point, I wasn't even mad anymore. I was curious how far she'd push it. Because something about the way she did it, that casual shrug, that little laugh the first time we talked, it had this vibe like she thought the rules just didn't apply to her. And that kind of attitude, well, that's the kind of attitude that tends to run straight into consequences sooner or later. And I had a feeling those consequences were about to get very expensive. All right, quick pause in the story here, because this is the part most people misunderstand when dealing with neighbors like this. A lot of folks assume situations like this are just petty arguments, two adults fighting over trash, noise, parking spots, whatever. But when you live in a community with an HOA, it's not just neighbor drama anymore. It's actually governed by a pretty specific set of rules. According to standard procedure in most U.S. homeowner associations, waste disposal falls under what and oppos, as called proper use of common facilities. That means the dumpsters, recycling areas, and trash policies are written directly into the HOA bylaws. And when someone intentionally dumps trash somewhere it doesn't and oppos, belong, especially onto another homeowner's property, that becomes a documented violation. Now here's the part most people don and oppos, realize. HOA enforcement is almost entirely evidence-based. From a legal perspective, if you walk into a complaint saying, "My neighbor keeps throwing trash into my yard," the board can't do much with that. But if you walk in with timestamps, photos, and clear video showing repeated violations, that changes everything. Because at that point it stops being a dispute between neighbors and becomes a compliance issue. And compliance issues come with fines, usually automatic ones. But there's also something psychological going on here. This is a psychological trap people fall into when they get used to small rule breaking without consequences. The first time Lena tossed that bag over my fence and nothing happened, her brain probably filed that away as, okay, that works. Then she did it again. Still no consequences. Again. Still nothing. Eventually the behavior becomes normal to them. They stop thinking of it as wrong. It just becomes a convenient shortcut. And shortcuts are addictive, especially when someone believes nobody's going to stop them. The problem is, once documentation starts, the whole game changes. Because the system doesn't react emotionally. It reacts mathematically. Every violation becomes a number. Every number becomes a fine. And those numbers stack up a lot faster than most people expect. And that's exactly where this story starts to escalate. So once I had the camera running and the incident log building up in my phone, the whole thing stopped feeling like random neighbor drama and started feeling more like a case file. I had clips, timestamps, clear shots of Lena stepping outside, looking around, tossing bags over the fence like she was pitching batting practice. And after about 2 weeks of collecting footage, I sat down one night and actually read through the HOA bylaws for the first time. I know, nobody ever reads those things unless something goes wrong. But buried in there was a section about improper waste disposal. And right next to it, the fine schedule. $100 per violation. No warning required if there's video proof. I remember leaning back in my chair thinking, well, that's interesting. So I compiled everything, the clips, the timestamps, the dates, and sent it to the HOA compliance email. Nothing dramatic, no angry rant, just a calm note saying, hey, this has been happening repeatedly. Here's the documentation. Then I waited. About a week later, I was coming home from work when I noticed something in Lena's mailbox slot on her door. One of those bright white envelopes from the HOA management office. I didn't think much of it until that evening when there was a loud knock on my door. And when I opened it, there she was. Lena, not smiling this time. She was holding the letter like it had personally insulted her. She goes, "Did you report me to the HOA?" No hello, no small talk, just straight accusation. I said, "I submitted video of the trash being thrown into my yard, yeah." She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and said, "You're being dramatic. You could have just talked to me." And that was the moment I had to remind her. I did talk to her. The very first time. She laughed about it. She shrugged it off. So I told her exactly that. And for a second, she just stared at me like she hadn't expected the conversation to go that direction. Then she muttered something about ridiculous neighbors and walked off. 2 days later, another bag came flying over the fence. I watched the notification pop up on my phone from the camera and just shook my head. At that point, it almost felt like she was daring the system to respond. So I clipped the footage, attached the timestamp, and sent it in again. Violation number 2. By the end of that month, there were 8 incidents documented. 8 separate videos. 8 separate fines. $800. Now, most reasonable people would probably stop somewhere around violation number 2, maybe number 3. But Lena had apparently decided the solution was to change her strategy instead of her behavior. Because suddenly the bags got smaller. Instead of full trash bags, it was little grocery bags. Juice pouches. Snack wrappers. Like somehow the size of the trash changed the rule. But the camera didn't care how big the bag was. The rule was simple: dumping waste on another property. Violation 9, 10, 11, 12. Over the next 6 weeks, the numbers kept climbing. The HOA eventually stopped sending warning letters and started automatically billing the fines to her account. I didn't even need to email them anymore. I'd just upload the clip to the portal and the system would log it. Then came violation number 17. And that one changed the tone completely. Because that afternoon she tossed a bag that must have had leftover food in it, and halfway over the fence the plastic split open. Rotten food just exploded across the grass. Rice, sauce, soggy takeout containers. The whole thing looked like someone had dumped a compost pile in my yard. And within minutes the flies showed up. Now normally I would have cleaned something like that immediately. But this time I didn't. Instead I filmed the entire thing. The trash, the flies, the smell you could practically imagine through the camera. Then I reported it not just as dumping, but as a sanitation issue. Because technically that's exactly what it was. A couple days later a city inspection notice appeared on her door. Apparently when trash is being handled improperly in residential areas, the city can issue citations separate from HOA fines. And that's exactly what happened. I didn't see the exact number she got hit with, but judging by the way her attitude shifted after that, it wasn't small. The yelling stopped. The eye contact stopped. For about 3 weeks the alley went quiet and my yard stayed completely clean. Honestly, I thought maybe that was the end of it. Then summer started. School let out. Kids home all day. And one afternoon I heard that familiar little thump against the fence again. Juice pouch. Next day, another one. Then a snack wrapper. Violation 18 through 31 stacked up over the next couple months. At that point, the combined HOA fines plus the city citation had already crossed the $3,000 mark. $3,000, because walking 30 feet was apparently too inconvenient. But even then she kept trying. So eventually I decided to add one more layer to the system. Motion-activated sprinklers. Not a complicated setup, just the kind people use to keep raccoons out of gardens. I placed one near the fence line where the trash usually landed. And the next time it happened, well, the camera footage was priceless. The bag came over the fence, landed, the sensor triggered, and suddenly water blasted across the yard. The trash got soaked. The fence got soaked. And Lena, who had apparently stepped a little too close to watch the throw, got soaked too. That clip went straight into the HOA portal. Violation 32. After that she started trying late-night tosses. Midnight. 1 in the morning. But the camera caught everything. 33. 34. 35. By the time violation 42 rolled around, the HOA board had finally escalated the situation to something called a lien warning. Basically a notice saying unpaid fines could eventually attach to the property itself. And apparently that's the point where the math finally sank in. Because about a week later, I saw Lena hauling 2 large rolling trash bins out of her garage. And for the first time since she moved in, she walked the extra 30 feet down the alley and actually used the dumpster like everyone else. No shortcuts. No tossing. No trash in my yard. It's been 9 months since then. Not one wrapper has crossed that fence. Which just goes to show, sometimes the most effective revenge isn't yelling, arguing, or trying to win the fight emotionally. Sometimes it's just letting the rules do their job. Now looking back at the whole thing, the weirdest part isn't the fines, it isn't the sprinkler moment, it isn't even the $3,000. The weirdest part is how avoidable the entire situation was. We're talking about a 30-foot walk. That's it. 10 seconds. Maybe 12 if you're carrying a heavy bag. But for whatever reason, Lena convinced herself that tossing trash over my fence was easier, or maybe that it just didn't matter. And that's the thing about living in shared communities. Little shortcuts like that don't stay little for very long. Because once someone starts treating shared rules like optional suggestions, the ripple effect spreads everywhere. From a legal perspective, HOAs exist for exactly this kind of situation. I know a lot of people hate them, and honestly sometimes for good reason. But the original idea behind them was simple. When dozens of people share walls, alleys, parking lots, dumpsters, you need a neutral system that keeps things fair. Without that structure, every disagreement turns into a personal feud. And personal feuds between neighbors can spiral fast. But what happened here also highlights something deeper on the human side of things. This is a psychological trap that shows up in a lot of everyday conflicts, not just HOAs, but workplaces, friendships, families. It starts with a small boundary being crossed. The other person shrugs it off or stays polite. Nothing happens. So the brain interprets that silence as permission. Then the behavior repeats. And repeats again. Over time, the person crossing the line doesn't even see it as wrong anymore. In their mind, it's just the normal way things work now. That's why documentation matters so much in these situations. Because emotions are messy. People argue, memories get fuzzy, stories change. But timestamps and video don't argue. According to standard procedure in most compliance systems, once you convert a pattern of behavior into documented violations, the conversation shifts from opinion to evidence. And evidence changes the power dynamic immediately. Now, I'll be honest. There were moments during this whole saga where I thought about just yelling across the alley or dragging the trash back to her door again or escalating things in some dramatic way. But that almost never ends well. When you match someone else's bad behavior with more bad behavior, all you get is a louder conflict. The lesson here is that sometimes the smartest move is stepping back and letting the structure around you do the work. The rules exist for a reason. The system might move slowly, but when you feed it clear proof, it tends to move very consistently. And once those fines started stacking up, it wasn't me teaching Lena the lesson anymore. It was the math. Every bag tossed over the fence had a price tag attached. Eventually, the cost of the shortcut became higher than the effort of just doing the right thing. And that's when behavior finally changes. 9 months later, the alley behind our homes is quiet again. The dumpsters are exactly where they've always been. My yard stays clean. Lena walks her trash down the alley like everyone else. We still don't talk much, just the occasional awkward nod if we pass each other outside. But honestly, that's fine. Peaceful distance between neighbors is sometimes the best outcome you can ask for. The whole experience did leave me wondering about something, though, and I'm curious what other people would have done in the same situation. Because everybody has a different tolerance level when it comes to neighbor problems. Some people would have shut it down immediately the first time it happened. Some might have ignored it for months just to avoid conflict. Some might have gone nuclear way earlier than I did. So here's the question I keep coming back to. If you were in my position, standing there in your kitchen watching someone toss trash into your yard like it was their personal dumpster, how long would you have waited before doing something about it? And more importantly, would you have handled it the same way, or would your approach have been completely different? I'm genuinely curious, because neighbor stories like this seem small on the surface, but they reveal a lot about how people think about fairness, boundaries, and respect when we're all forced to share the same space. So yeah, that was the 30-foot shortcut that ended up costing someone more than $3,000. Not exactly the most efficient route after all.